So, it's that time of the year, the end of the year. That's how years go, they end somewhere, and this is it. So, back with another video celebrating some albums, this time my 10 favourite albums of the year. Now I'm going to do a couple of honourable mentions before I get into my top 10, and I'd also like to say as well that none of these are numbered. I don't have a number one. These are just the 10 albums that I've listened to the most. That's my criteria for it. I could try and intellectualise it more than that and get into some deep sort of critique, but these are just the albums that I found myself gravitating towards more than the others. So I'm sure there's plenty that I've missed, so make sure you leave your comments about your favourites. But yeah, let's get into it. Before we get into the top 10, let's do the honourable mentions. And my first pick for this, so that Andy will stop going on at me about it, is High on Fire with Cometh the Storm. High on Fire have been a favoured band of mine for many, many years at this point, and I thought initially that this would make my top 10, but unfortunately a few other albums have kind of snuck in there. But I did want to mention it because it is a fantastic album. This band always delivers sludgy, doomy goodness. There was a little less thrash on this album. That was the only thing that brought it down a bit for me. Luminiferous is probably one of my favourite High on Fire albums. It had as much more thrashy elements in it. This was just lacking those a little bit more. If it had a bit more of that, I think this would have been in the top 10. But either way, High on Fire, incredibly reliable band, always a good time, always heavy as fuck. And yeah, makes my honourable mentions list. Will that do, Andy? Is that enough? Probably not. My next pick is another artist that you can always count on for quality music, and that is Ihsahn with his self-titled album. This album was so cinematic that they actually released the orchestral version of it on its own, and yeah, it stands up. It's a cracking album, this one. Ihsahn is just an incredibly talented individual. I guess he's kind of the black metal equivalent of Devin Townsend. Incredibly talented guy, and he's never afraid to experiment and try something new and incorporate it into his music. And this album is just spectacular. It's a beautiful album. But again, didn't quite make my top 10. Next honourable mention is Fulci with Duckface Killings. They write incredibly heavy death metal, and each of their albums is based on one of the films by horror maestro Lucio Fulci. What's not to like? Fourth album that didn't quite make the top 10 was Judas Priest with Invincible Shield. I'm not a huge traditional metal fan. I mean, I love Maiden like everybody else, and I do like some Priest, but I wouldn't call myself a major fan. However, the last two albums I found to be absolutely fantastic. Was it 2018 that Firepower came out? That's a cracking album as well. This is a band who just really feel like they're in their latter years. They're just having fun doing the music that they do and just doing it well. Everybody still sounds fantastic. The riffs are amazing. Halford still sounds great. And they just write these incredibly catchy, memorable, fun, traditional heavy metal songs. Fucking great. Nothing not to like. But yeah, didn't quite make my top 10, but great album. And my last honourable mention is What a Fucking Nightmare by The Chisel. I had to have some hardcore punk represented on this list, and this is it for me. This is an incredible album. I think this is the second album from the Englandhamshire punk people. This is pure unadulterated oi, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Fantastic album. And now, without further ado or hindrance, or get on with it, my top 10 albums of 2024. Once again, these are in no particular order, but the first album on my list is Absolute Elsewhere by Blood Incantation. And I mentioned this one first because I'm pretty sure this is one of those albums that's going to be on most people's lists. My review back in August, was it? No, October 4th via Century Media Records. Pretty much the first thing I said on the review was this is a strong contender for album of the year, and it's pretty much what I've heard every other reviewer saying as well. So I have no doubt that so many of the other channels that you watch are going to have this album on there. This is the band's fourth studio album, and it pretty much consists of 2 songs essentially spanning 45 minutes, but those 2 songs are split into 3 tracks each. So what did we have? The Stargate being the first 3 tracks, and the second 3 tracks, if that makes any sense, being the Message. And this is just fantastic prog death metal. I believe the thumbnail for this video for me was, what if Pink Floyd made death metal, or is, you know, the Pink Floyd of death metal, something like that. And that pretty much sums up this album. I enjoyed this the moment I heard it, and I've enjoyed it every single time I've listened to it ever since. It's one of those albums that really does take you on a journey, and it has to be listened to as a whole. It really is a concept album, and it just works so well. I don't know if it's quite up there with albums like Crack the Sky for me. Only time will tell for that. You know, I've had I've had years with that album, but this is definitely, I feel, one of those albums that is going to be in my life for the life. My next pick is the first of 2 non-metal albums on this list, and this is Songs of a Lost World by The Cure, released November 1st. And this was the band's first album in 16 years. And this album just hits me so hard in the emotionals. Gets me right in the emotionals. Oh. Now, I've already talked about this album quite a lot in my Cure album ranking video, which a lot of you seem to enjoy, by the way. Which actually pleased me, because I had quite a few people telling me not to do that video. So it's always quite gratifying when you stick to your guns, do it, and find that a lot of people enjoy it. Anyway, enough blowing of the trumpet. I'll do more on that in a bit. The inspiration for this album came from the poem Dregs by Ernest Dowson, or at least lyrically anyway, and this one really deals with just looking at the world and the problems we have in it, but more specifically age and loss and grief, and it's a really dark album. They didn't cater to anybody for this album whatsoever. It's not commercial in any way, and the lyrics just hit me really, really hard. As I'm getting older, this sort of stuff just gets me every time. The final track on the album, the fittingly titled End Song, in particular, just really gets me with the lyrics, and wondering what became of the boy and the world he called his own. I'm outside in the dark, wondering how I got so old. It's all gone, nothing left of all I loved. The older I get, the more stuff like this just hits me hard nowadays. But this album is a beautiful, somber, dark, brooding masterpiece. I've been a fan of The Cure for a long time, and this album did not disappoint me at all. I think it's an absolutely amazing return, and I'm really eager to see what they do next. So, yep, that's my next pick. Last pick. The pick I just talked about. Next up, released on August 23rd, it's The Underworld Awaits Us All by Nile. I've been a fan of Nile for a long time. They're hands down one of my favourite death metal bands. But I think many people would probably agree that a lot of the stuff that they were doing in the 2000 teens were a little more lackluster. The kind of, well, not lackluster, but a bit more repetitive, just kind of doing the same thing over and over. But ever since Dallas left the band, I hate to say it because I think he was an amazing guitar player, amazing vocalist, amazing contributor to the band, but it seems like there's been a bit of a renewed energy with the new members that have come in. Vile Nilotic Rites, which was released in 2019, was an incredible album, and this one takes it even a step further and just feels even more re-energized and invigorated. It's a fantastic album. There's so many great points on this. Stele of Vultures is a great opening track. Chapter for not being hung upside down and made to eat feces by the 4 apes. Is it that right? Something like that. That's an absolute banger. To Strike with Secret Fang is like 2 minutes of just absolute brutality. And then we have, what was it? We had Nakada 2, Enter the Golden Age, Overlords of the Black Earth, and Under the Curse of the One God, all of which have these amazing choral sections in them, which they just utilise so well. It really brings this album to life. It's got a very cinematic feel to it, actually. I found when I was listening to this, it really just conjured up such vivid imagery, and I love it when albums do this. This has been a band with a remarkably consistent discography, and this one fits so well into it. An amazing album from start to finish, and I just return to it often since it's come out. So simple as that. Like I said, a lot of these albums are they're just the ones that I've listened to a lot over the course of the year. So Nile, Underworld Awaits Us All, amazing album. Next we have another album I'm pretty sure is going to be on a lot of other people's album of the year lists, and that is Opeth with The Last Will and Testament, and this was released 22nd of November. Not only was this the band's first album in 5 years, but this was the first to, as we all know, see Michael Ackerfeld return to his growls, his death growls. He really does have some of the best death growls in the business, and we also get the music returns much more to that classic Opeth that we know and love. However, one thing that I really did enjoy, the death growls do serve a purpose. There was an interview I read of him where he was talking about how the reason he decided to start doing the death growls again was because it fit the character. This is a concept album. I've already spoken about this at length in my Opeth album ranking video, but it's all based around a family and a lot of shit's going on. And we have the conservative, overbearing patriarch of the family, and that is who Michael depicts with the death growls, and it just works so effectively. This is such a great story, another one that's got a lot of visual appeal. As you're listening to this album, it just conjures up all sorts of imagery, and it's just amazing. This one features Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson as well as Europe's Joey Tempest, and they're used to amazing effect. It's just done so well. It's an amazing concept album, as you would expect from a band like Opeth, and as talented as they are, and it's just executed perfectly. Wonderful return to form, and one of my albums of the year. Much like Blood Incantation's Absolute Elsewhere, this was one of those ones that as soon as I heard it, loved it straight away, knew it was going to make my end of year list, and yeah, sure enough it has. Nothing's taken its place. Incredible album. Next up we got a heavier entry for you, and Every Bridge Burning by Nails, released August 30th via Nuclear Blast Records. Todd Jones returns with his latest offering from grindcore power violence, just straight up heavy as fuck band Nails. This was the first album to be released since 2016's incredible You Will Never Be One of Us, although we did get a couple of tracks released in between, one of which being the equally incredible collaboration with Max Cavalera with Endless Resistance, one of my favourite Nails tracks. That song is grindy as all hell. Love it. Like, guitar tone is something to die for, man. And this is also the first to feature the new lineup of guitarist Shelby Lermo, drummer Carlos Cruz, and bassist Andrew Solis, as well as the mastermind behind it all, obviously Todd Jones, as I already aforementioned. Lacking the ability to process empathy is a particular favourite of mine. It's just absolutely pummeling, and it really highlights the philosophy of this band, which is to say as much as you can in as short a time possible and just pummel the listener with aggression. I mean, I think the entire album's like 20 minutes, something like that. Most Nails albums are, but they pack so much into that time, you just feel like you've been battered by the end of it. I wouldn't go so far to say that this is my favourite album by the band, but it's definitely one of my top picks of the year, and they never disappoint. I'm always happy to hear new Nails material. Just an incredibly brutal album. Next up we have some black metal, or more specifically some atmospheric black metal, and this is Passage de Hiver with De Berg, released November 8th via SPKR Media. This is the latest work from atmospheric black metal artist Passage de Hiver, who's also known as Winther. It's the sole member of the band, whose real name is Tobias Mokel, I think it is. I only got into this artist a few years ago, but I've been pretty fascinated with everything that they've done ever since. I think they started in like 1996. Passage de Hiver itself, I believe, stands for Winter Landscape, and I think each album essentially represents a chapter in the journey through this landscape of the lone wanderer. And this particular album, De Berg, translates as the mountains, and I'll just quickly read out something from the Bandcamp page. The main theme of De Berg is death, and this time the enigmatic wanderer's journey is comparable to that of a Zen monk who hikes to the peak of a mountain on a feeling that his time has come. This is an album that's transfixed me since its release in November. Actually came out the day after my birthday, which none of you congratulated me for, so you can make up for that by liking, subscribing and commenting, all right? We'll just move on. But seriously, subscribe. The album consists of just 7 songs, however the runtime is 1 hour 42 minutes. And this is just an incredibly engrossing, meditative listen. It's one of those ones that you can kind of put on when you're working, you know what I mean? Or I do a lot of writing for work, and this is one of those albums that I can listen to on the headphones as I'm writing, and it just kind of takes me off to another world. And I can't get enough of this album. If you haven't heard this artist and this album in particular, check it out. You won't be disappointed. An absolutely fantastic album, and I can't recommend it enough. Incredible album. My next pick is Spleen and Goad by Iron Monkey, released on the 5th of April via Relapse Records. I've been listening to this band since 1997 when I first heard the track Big Loader. It was on the compilation album, the Earplugged 2 compilation album, and I've just been I just enjoy this band so much. I've heard many people cite this band as the English version of I Hate God, which is not an inaccurate description, to be fair. A lot of you might be aware of this band and will be aware that original vocalist Johnny Marrow sadly passed away in 2002, and the band, quite understandably, went on hiatus until 2017. I think it was 2017, yeah, when founding member Jim Rushby reformed the band, and that year they released 913, which was a brutal album. And I actually reviewed that one on my old channel. If I remember, I'll try and put a link for that in the description of this video. One of my first videos I ever did, actually, for YouTube, so there you go. And Spleen and Goad is the second album to be released since this comeback. I believe most of the songs were actually written in 2018 or 2019. They kind of had it ready to go, and then of course the world shut down and there were various other things that got in the way, and the album didn't come out until this year. But this is a brutal offering, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people won't have this mentioned, but I feel I have to, because it's just such a damn good album. I love this band. As brutal as all hell, unrelenting. It's just the guitar tone, and oh god, it's just grimy and dirty. Got elements of hardcore, grindcore, doom. You've got Sabbath kind of inspired riffs going on. It's just amazing. Not only that, Jim Rushby's unhinged vocals just suit this music so well. Johnny Marrow did a fantastic job when he was in the band, and Jim Rushby, I think he really steps up to the plate and continues the legacy of this incredible band. If you haven't checked out this album, do. It's brutally heavy, but in a good way. Amazing album. My next pick is an album that I hope a lot more people talk about, and it's Ancients, Beyond the Reach of the Sun. Ancients are one of those bands that you might have heard and you might have forgotten about. They started making a buzz in 2013 with their first album, Heart of Oak, and their follow-up, Voice of the Void, was 2016? Yeah, 2016. Both of those are absolutely incredible albums, but for various reasons they kind of just fell out of I don't know if they stopped making music before the pandemic or because of that, but they kind of just disappeared and didn't really hear anything about them for a while, until this year we heard that there was going to be a new album coming out, and I for one was very excited, and this album did not disappoint me. This is absolutely incredible. Anyone who's a fan of old school Mastodon, old school Opeth, Baroness bands like this is going to absolutely love this album, this band in fact, because they're one of those bands that they mixed technical playing and very intricate playing with real emotion. You know what I mean? It's very easy to get a lot of bands that really play well, but they kind of lack a soul. That's not the case with Ancients. This is an incredibly emotional album. It's so well played, it's so well produced, it's just a joy to listen to. Again, like a few of the albums I've mentioned on today's list, it's an album that needs to be listened to as a whole. It's a beautiful experience, and this is one of those ones that just takes you on a real journey. Ancients, if you haven't checked out this band, do. If you're a fan of any of the bands that I've already mentioned, you're going to absolutely love this band. They're incredible, and I just got carried away, just sort of, I was talking about a band that takes you on a journey, and then I kind of looked over this landscape and it kind of made me think of the music that I was listening to. So yeah, beautiful album, great band, check it out. My next pick is Chelsea Wolfe with She Reaches Out to She, Reaches Out to She. This is her 7th studio album, and this joins the ranks of her incredibly consistent discography. I'm always a fan of what she does. I'm always going to check it out. She's experimented with a lot of different styles over the years, but this one sees a return to the industrial goth instrumentation of albums like Hiss Spun and the incredible Abyss, which is probably my favourite album of hers. It's just an incredibly dark, beautiful listen. According to Wolfe, the title of this album refers to the past version of yourself connecting with the present version of yourself, connecting with the future version of yourself. From what I understand, the album was inspired by Chelsea achieving sobriety in January of 2021. But she also mentioned the inspiration of seeing a friend leave a toxic relationship of 30 years and learning how to live on their own again was also a big part of it. I read somewhere that she stated she started drinking as a pre-teen, so I'm wondering if this 30-year relationship she's talking about is a reference to herself and alcohol, or if it's something else. But once again, an incredibly dark, sinister, heartfelt, yet beautiful album. I never tire of her work. It's just, she really is a true artist. There are also 2 EPs that were released as companion pieces to this album. The first one being called Undone, and this consists of remixes done by Ash Kusha, Full of Hell, Boy Harsher, Justin K. Broderick, of Godflesh fame, of course, amazing artist, and Forest Swords and Crosses. And the second one, Unbound, consists of acoustic versions of some of these songs. And I mean, like I said, she's just an incredible artist, a real artist, a true artist. And it's always, I don't know if joy is the right word, but I'm always going to check out anything Chelsea Wolfe puts out. Her music is just incredible. It's so heartfelt, so well put together. It's just great album. That's all there is to say. And my final pick, and this one might get a few people pissed off maybe, because I'm sure they'll be thinking of some other heavy albums that should be mentioned instead, but I've got to go with my heart and my ears and my, my brain head stuff that, thoughts go on in there and that. Wild God by Nick Cave. I've been a fan of Nick Cave for a very long time, and much like Chelsea Wolfe, another true artist, someone who always sticks to his vision and does what the hell he wants. And this album has a similar vibe to me as Songs of a Lost World by The Cure, in that it's a lot of the lyrics that just hit me on this one. Again, so many of the artists that I've grown up with are obviously grown as well, and everybody's getting older, and there's just something about this album that I find very emotional. Nick Cave himself actually described the album like this: there's no fucking around with this record. When it hits, it hits. It lifts you, it moves you. I love that about it, and I do as well. This is the follow-up to 29's Ghost Teen, which was also an incredible album. I've heard a few people talking badly about this album, saying it's kind of repeating a lot of what they've done over the last couple of albums, but I don't see that at all. I think it's just, I think it's a real, I don't know, this is probably their best album I've heard from them in a long time. I know that Ghost Teen was essentially a studio collaboration between Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, whereas this album is a real collaboration with the whole of the Bad Seeds getting involved in it again. I believe that was inspired after the global shutdown and how the band got on stage together again and just enjoyed being with each other, and just the energy that they produced together, and really produced this collaborative effort. I just think this is an incredible album. It was 30th of August this one came out, and I've been listening to it on steady rotation ever since. Standout tracks for me on this one are Frogs, Final Rescue Attempt and Conversion. And that's my final pick for my top 10 albums of the year. There are plenty of other albums that I enjoyed this year. There are plenty of others that I could have talked about, and I'm sure that you have many that you're pissed off that I haven't talked about. So make sure you leave your comments down below, and it could be that there's albums that I didn't get around to hearing as well. But as I said, these are just the albums that really stood out to me and I just keep returning to. I think there's a lot of times trying to pick albums that are maybe a bit more obscure or whatever, but I just can't help but go with the fact that these are the albums that I want to listen to that album right now. You know how it goes, man. You know how it goes. But yeah, those are my top picks for the year. There's been a lot of good music this year and I'm really looking forward to hearing what next year has to offer. We're going to have more album rankings, we're going to have more top 10s, and in the new year, hopefully we'll start doing some proper reviews again. There hasn't been much that's piqued my interest over this last month or so. And I'm hoping that that's we're going to start getting some real decent albums coming out again. And maybe I'll do a list of my most anticipated albums for next year. That could be a good one to do as well. But there's plenty more to come, plenty of videos to come. So many people are subscribing right now, it's crazy. Thank you all for the support, as always. And I'm rambling now, I finished the video, let's do this, let's just end. I'm going to do it, I'm ending now. Goodbye, all right, bye-bye.